We need that Jeopardy music playing in the background.
All right. Well, it's 7:03. Why don't we get started, and then we can add the other commissioners as they get here. So, Laura, would you do the roll call, please?
Commissioner Golden,
I'm here.
Commissioner Haskell,
Here.
Vice Chair Koff-Sill,
Here.
Chair Taylor,
Present?
and Commissioner Targ is not present yet.
Okay. Undoubtedly, he'll be here soon. So, all right. So welcome, everyone. We're at, as I mentioned, 12 attendees at the moment. So I'm going to open it up for oral communications. If you have any comments that you would like to present to the Planning Commission that are not related to the agenda tonight, please raise your hand. And I will start with Mary Hufty. Mary, welcome.
I'm about to do something I haven't done before, so it makes me a little nervous. But anyway, I'm going to speak to the Planning Commission about an important governance issue in planning. It seems that your job is about to become a whole lot harder, and your local authority will be greatly diminished by upcoming legislative changes in Sacramento. These will deeply and thoughtlessly affect the safety and character of our town. SB 9 and 10 are housing bills which all of us can easily understand will take away any chance for sensible local decision-making input. They exempt development from the CEQA requirements of analysis and public disclosure. The Woodside Town Council and many other towns at similar risk to fire and earthquake have sent unanimous letters to oppose SB 9. I suggest that you recommend to our council that they consider taking this critical and time-sensitive step to show us, your town, and our town's governance's respect for our environmental safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. All right, next up, it looks like Betsy Morgenthaler. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. My comments tonight are all geared towards strengthening process. I've a truly high regard for the quality of you all, volunteer commissioners, and believe the efficiency of your deliberations are quite relevant and could be improved with process adjustments. Some areas that I noted recently that would benefit from improvement, our staff reports recently are followed by associated materials of substantial length. The materials are running to hundreds of pages, as it did at both your June 16th meeting and at the ASCC May 10th meeting. The issue is that much of this information is redundant. It's past meeting information, which in turn pushes key pieces of new information to page numbers that run into the mid 300s or into the 400s. On June 16th, both the Conservation Committee report, which appeared in the mid 300s, it was page 351, as I recall by memory, but you could check that. Separately, there was a highly relevant arborist report that was located within the May 10th ASCC meetings, but buried on pages 337 to 340. They were essentially unfindable, even when you knew they were there somewhere. So the ASCC commissioners had been only given from Friday afternoon to that Monday, in other words, around 72 hours to cover in excess of 400 pages in detail. And that just seems an unrealistic ask, presented as it was. So the buried arborist report and highly pertinent information wasn't called out until a month later at your meeting around 9 o'clock at night. I think that was a surprise to everybody. And where I'd like to go with this is remedying this by bringing pertinent pieces as far forward in the materials as possible. And I include committee reports. All of our standing committees deserve being front loaded in our staff reports, and the consultant that we pay for their reports as well. Otherwise, I think this is an exercise in frustration, and certainly doesn't serve you commissioners whose task is onerous enough as it is, and the community repercussions of your decisions are so lasting. Just one other quick case in point, and it regards the minutes, because I went to the Planning Commission site today and noticed the most recently posted Planning Commission meetings date back to April 21st. It seems reasonable to ask, where are the past 5 meeting minutes, why they haven't been posted, and the fact that we're having to handle problems like this happened as well in October after your 7-month hiatus. You approved back minutes from February and January 2020, as well as November 2019. So this problem predates the COVID quarantine, and I think we need to shore up the public's ability to engage appropriately with the material, particularly going into these weighty decisions. I will not continue because I bet my time's about up, but I do have 4 proposals I'll be sending along with my comments in a letter. Specifically, one of them is, could we please pass these minutes on the front end as the town council does, rather than putting them out there at 11 o'clock at night when we're all so dog tired?
Okay, well, if you could send those as written comments, that would be great. Then we can consider them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Rusty Day, you're up next. Welcome, Rusty. Oh, and could you note that Commissioner Targ is here?
Thank you very much, Craig. I want to address comments expressed by certain town officials after the opportunity for public comment was closed last week at the joint ASCC Planning Commission meeting on the Stanford project. On the story polls, I heard one official say that he'd been appointed to decide this project, that he had a lot of experience with building plans and thought he could visualize the project without any story polls, and that he therefore saw no need to install story polls to depict the full scale or bulk of the project. I've lived here over 30 years. I don't think I've ever heard such an imperious view of an appointed official's authority. Until last week, the purpose of story polls has always been to inform the public about the size, bulk, and visual impact of a project so the public can weigh in before decisions are made. But no longer. Now it seems we no longer need or want the public to see what's going to happen before it's approved. On the town's ordinance prohibiting developers from discriminating against low-income families in the number of bedrooms they provide as affordable housing, I also heard a town official say that the ordinance doesn't matter because Stanford can simply force the town to waive it. Not true. First of all, Stanford is entitled to 2 concessions only under state bonus density law. And it has already used both of those concessions to try to reduce parcel sizes and increase building size. But more importantly, our anti-discrimination ordinance is not subject to waiver. It was carefully written as a mandatory condition that developers must satisfy if they want the benefit of our inclusionary zoning ordinance. No compliance, no bonus increase in allowed units under our ordinance. It baffles me that residents have to bring this up, that the building department doesn't insist on compliance with our ordinances, that the town attorney does not candidly acknowledge Stanford's failure to comply with the ordinance, and that town officials are loath to enforce our ordinances as written. But it baffles me even more that residents are not granted the same opportunity as Stanford is granted to address these concerns and have them heard. 6 months ago, I was publicly assured that residents would be given a fair opportunity to fully present their concerns about the project's discrimination against low-income families and about fire and evacuation safety, etc. I still hope to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith Murphy, you're up next. Welcome, Judith.
Thank you. I just want to say something clarifying. Last week, when I made a comment about the process on the fire station not serving us well, I wanted to clarify, evidently that was heard as a criticism of planning staff, which was not at all my intention. This was not a criticism of the planning staff. I think they've followed the town process very precisely and exactly. And aside from the 400-page materials packet for ASCC, which boggled my mind, I really have no criticism of the process as it's been. What I was wishing for was that we'd all had the foresight to recognize how unique and difficult this project is, and that we'd supplemented our usual process with a more fully collaborative approach. And I commented not to criticize, but so that the next time we have a unique project, and most of them are not unique as this one, we will remember this one and attempt to make the next one smoother and faster. I feel very badly that the fire department is still talking to us 2 years after they started this. It does seem absurd. And I think, you know, had we thought this through at the beginning a little better, and I mean us collectively, the town, everybody involved, you know, including me. So I just want to clear that up in case anybody took this to be like I was rapping their knuckles, because I was definitely not. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Is there any other public comment this evening before we move on to the first? All right, so seeing none, I'd like to reopen the public hearing to review the application for a municipal code text amendment, a conditional use permit amendment, and an architectural and site development review for the expansion of the existing fire station number 8. So with that, is there a staff report?
Yes, there's a staff's presentation, so I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yes, please do. Thank you, Dylan.
And can everyone see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Okay. All right, so thank you, Chair Taylor and members of the commission. So at the last meeting, the commission raised 2 concerns about the proposal. The first was about removal of the large coast redwood tree that's proximate to the fire station to accommodate a new front parking area. And so a supplemental analysis by the project arborist of the project's impacts to this specific tree was requested by the commission. And the second concern raised was about potential groundwater contamination from an on-site leaking underground storage tank. So the commission requested that the staff and applicant perform additional research and to provide construction best management practices to address any of these groundwater contamination issues. And so staff just wanted to note that this presentation tonight serves as a supplemental for the one that was presented at the last meeting on June the 16th, and will only cover these 2 concerns. And so staff also wanted to point out for anyone joining us tonight for the first time, welcome. And they want to get up to speed on the project. We have been updating, there is a project website and we've updated it to include all of the materials for the June the 16th meeting, including the Zoom recording and also the agenda. And so if they want to visit, to get up to speed, they can visit the project's webpage at www.portolavalley.net/projects, which is the green hyperlink on this slide. And so with that, staff will begin the presentation discussing the tree removal concern. And so based on the fire district's request for 18 parking spaces to accommodate on-site operations, a large 59.8-inch diameter at chest height coast redwood tree is proposed for removal for a new front surface parking area with 18 spaces. Additionally, an underground stormwater retention tank is proposed to be installed under the surface parking area to address any on-site water runoff and drainage issues. And so at the June 16th meeting, the Planning Commission asked whether it would be possible to reduce the amount of parking from the requested 18 to 16, or to potentially retain the tree in question. And so as detailed in their supplemental report, which is attachment 3 of the staff's report, a supplemental memorandum report, the project arborist determined the following for the subject tree. So the tree is in poor health due to drought stress and structural defects. Secondary leaders are susceptible to failure during inclement weather, such as high winds, storms, and this could actually impact either the station or Portola Road if the tree fails. The tree's size, its growth rate, and the expanding root system there too results in some risk to the foundation of the fire station, the existing footprint. And so in consideration of the commission's request for the parking reduction, the project arborist considered this and determined that removal of the 2 parking spaces from the proposal, begin quote, will still significantly damage the root system, end quote, and that excavation for the permeable pavers, which were proposed as the material for the surface parking area, would impact 50% of the root area and, begin quote, will likely require removal of anchoring roots, end quote. And then lastly, that the excavation for the stormwater retention tank would also impact these anchoring roots. And so therefore, the arborist did recommend removal of the tree in both the original 18 parking spaces program and then also the commission's reduced parking program. And so staff just wanted to discuss a component of the design guidelines that deals with redwood trees in the community. So the town's design guidelines include a section that's titled Redwood Guidelines. And it discusses the 4 listed factors: aesthetics, safety, neighborly, and economic. And this section includes following language. This is quoted. Whether or not these trees should be removed requires a balancing of aesthetics, safety, neighborly, and economic considerations. And so based on the supplemental arborist report discussed previously, information that's already on the record related to the project, staff is concluding that that there is sufficient basis for the tree to be removed with the parking in front, because there is a reasonable balance being proposed between those 4 criteria and then other town policies. And so with that, with the tree removal concern discussed, staff will now turn to the underground storage tank issue. And so just for everyone's benefit, there will be a lot of acronyms. I will describe all of them just for everyone's so they can follow along. So at the last hearing, one of the commissioners noted that an underground storage tank, or also known as a UST, appeared to have been located on the property and inquired about the need for further environmental assessment. So staff communicated with the applicant team and then did research on publicly available records, commonly referred to as a GeoTracker. It's a state database. And we found 2 files for the adjacent parcel, which is a former Unocal gas station address is 105 Portola Road. And then the parcel in question, 135 Portola Road. And so based on these records, it appears, and on the slide, it kind of just gives you kind of a time, like a chronological history of kind of what's happened between 1988 and 2006. So I'll just go through everything. So in 1988, it appears that there was an unauthorized leak reported at 105 Portola Road. So that's the adjacent parcel. And so there were groundwater monitoring wells installed at both 105 and 135 Portola Road due to this leak. And then a leaking underground storage tank, or LUST case, was opened on 105 Portola Road. In 1991, 105 Portola Road was found the responsible party after characterizing the leak. And then subsequently, there were three large underground storage, three of the large LUST tanks, three of the large LUST and one small LUST was removed from the gas station. Additionally, between 1991 and 1997, 105 Portola Road treated 214,543 gallons of groundwater per their site management plan, or S&P. And then in 1998, 135 Portola Road, which is the fire station, removed a underground storage tank, so not a LUST, it wasn't determined to be leaking, but just an UST, per state law. So state law had a requirement that all underground storage tanks needed to be removed within this time frame, and then they replaced it with an above ground tank. The tank is primarily for diesel fuel for the equipment on site. So in 1998, the groundwater wells for both sites were removed. And so the LUST case records indicate that the 135 Portola tank removal that was proposed in 1998, which staff provided the town records indicating this, it looks like it was noted as being removed in 1999 per county records. So there's a discrepancy with the case opening. In 2000, the LUST case for 105 Portola Road was closed, and they received a closure letter, which detailed that information. And then in 2006, the subject property, the fire station, also received a LUST case closure letter. And so focusing on that LUST case closure letter for the fire station, staff reached out to the county staff, the underground storage tank program for the county of San Mateo, to ask some questions, particularly to determine why the LUST case was open for 6 years, amongst other questions. And so those questions are listed here on the slide. For example, when the case was opened in 2000, was there, or when it was closed in 2006, was a S&P or a site management plan required for the closure? And so county responded in the negative. Also, if there was any remediation work required for the closure, and the county also responded in the negative. And then the county also noted that there was not any requirement for future development notification. And so typically in a LUST case situation, sometimes the county places a condition or a requirement on a site that any development that occurs, and this commonly happens with gas stations, that there must be notification to the county program before anything occurs or the town approves a permit, et cetera. So there was no notification requirement for that 2006 closure. And then the question arose on, based on the proposal, so I provided the proposal at hand, if the county would require a site management plan or an S&P for our current proposal. And they indicated that only if there was contaminated groundwater and or soil discovered through excavation, or if there was testing of that groundwater and or soil that resulted in higher contaminant levels than reported in 2006, then the county would potentially ask for a SMP. Based on the 2006 contaminant levels, the county determined that the levels, because they hadn't changed, that they generally wouldn't require any ongoing remediation or mitigation, if you will. However, to ensure that any issues or concerns that may arise given the proposal, staff has included, based on this conversation, condition 12, which requires that on-site groundwater and soil testing and also employment of best management practices, or BMPs, are employed on site to manage and dispose of any contaminated water and or soil that's discovered on site. And this has to happen prior to the town issuing a grading permit. So that's condition number 12 that we've added to the recommended conditions of approval from last time. And so now just turning to the environmental review, or the CEQA analysis. So just in consideration of the site's placement on the Cortese list, which is basically a statewide database that lists either active or closed LUST cases, staff is limited to utilizing the common sense exemption, which is allowed under section 15061 B3 of CEQA. And that additional analysis we provided in the draft resolution as attachment 1 of your staff report. And so with that, this concludes staff's presentation, short supplemental presentation, and we'll turn it over for any comments or questions. Staff just wanted to back end or remind everyone in the audience of that project website for any more project related information. So thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. All right, commissioners, are there any clarifying questions relative to the staff report? Seeing none. Let's see. Just disappear. No, okay, she's there. Just don't see her on my list. Okay. So Judith, you'll raise your hand if you have concerns, or you can just verbally speak up.
Yeah, I have no questions right now. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I just don't, since you're on the phone, I don't want to lose you. So please feel free to interrupt, and then I'll slot you in the right place if I don't sort of recognize you.
Will do.
Okay, so then is there an applicant presentation?
Yes, there is.
Great. Why don't you proceed, please?
Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present an updated presentation. We thought we would start out with a quick recap of the needs and the proposed solution for those who may not have been in attendance in our last couple of meetings. We're going to also provide a timeline of the approval process and address the specific items of concern raised. The town ordinance, allowable use in the R1 zoning, location of the parking lot, the size of the parking lot, the proposed removal of redwood trees, and the groundwater contamination concern. And then we'll provide a summary at the end. So first of all, the existing station is outdated. It needs to be improved. It was originally constructed back in 1977. It was remodeled in 94 to 95. It does not comply with the current Department of Homeland Security requirements. It does not comply with modern fire station design and safety measures. The station does not comply with the accessibility code requirements, and the station does not accommodate the current needs. The station currently only has one office and 3 bedrooms. One of the offices is also being used as a bedroom. The fitness room also has to be used to accommodate firefighters sleeping in cots at times. Clean turnouts have to be stored in the apparatus bay where they are subject to pollution from the diesel from the trucks. The apparatus has to be stored off-site since it can't be left outside due to homeland security. So one of the pieces of equipment that we want to have in Portola Valley to help protect the residents there has to be stored actually in Woodside. There's not enough parking. The staff spots to accommodate the night before changes, visitor spots, and equipment parking is needed. There's no accommodation for visiting apparatus that is required to cover the area when the responders are out on a call. So our proposed solution to this is that we're going to increase the number of bedrooms from 3 to 5, or 4 to 5 if you consider the existing office slash bedroom as a bedroom in that count. There needs to be some dedicated offices. We need to have a new turnout room to keep the firefighters' PPEs protected and not getting contaminated from diesel exhaust. We need a new apparatus bay so that we can park the equipment there in Portola Valley where it belongs instead of in Woodside. We really need to have a drive-through for the visiting apparatus. We need to improve training facilities. And generally the building is outdated, needs to be remodeled. It needs new roofing, kitchen, painting, floor finish, all that stuff. And we need additional parking spaces. So I'm going to turn it over now to Bill Gutzel with CJW Architects to kind of talk a little bit about the neighborhood outreach recap.
Thank you, Mike, very much. Thank you, commissioners and planning staff. Thank you for the staff report and the presentation that you've all made. With regard to the neighborhood outreach recap, just to be sure everybody understands, we have had several design meetings with the neighbors. The district then took comments developed from those meetings, and it was apparent that the proposed sheriff's office was not desirable, so that was removed from the project. We also removed a proposed drive-through lane to the front, relocated a proposed drive-through lane to the front of the property, and relocated the proposed additional parking to the front of the property. The relocated trash collection area was moved from the rear property near the neighbors, and the removal of the exterior lighting from the new apparatus bay back wall. We did reduce the number and size of windows in the new apparatus bay and revise the landscaping and screening, although some of the landscaping proposal is still to be determined based on discussion with the neighbors and the desires that they might have with regard to what that material might be, and some enhancements there. The south neighbor has requested that we try to maintain the landscaping buffer, in particular at her property, which is something that she has maintained over the years and would really like to see maintained so that she can gain some enjoyment from it. Just to review the planning department review timeline, as has been, I think, stated previously, we began this process back in late 2019. And at the planning department's suggestion that we handle or have a community meeting, we did schedule a community meeting, which happened to be just 3 days after the shelter in place for COVID was enforced. We moved the Zoom community outreach meeting to late September of 2020, and afterwards had an first ASCC meeting in November 2020. Early 2021, we had our first planning commission meeting, and then we were sent back to the second ASCC meeting to confirm some of the parking requirements and the tree removals and so on. Afterwards, we June, we had the second Planning Commission meeting, which at that time was then continued to this meeting, and that's where we stand today. As Mike suggested, Station 8 has been existing in this location since 1997. And by the way, it was originally approved for, the station was originally, pardon me, station was originally approved to be located on this site and as a part of the general plan and the Nathorst Triangle in late 1960s, 68 and 69, I believe it was. So it's not that the station has only been there since 1967, the approval, 1977. The approval for it has been long-term. In 1987, the town did change the zoning ordinance and to this lot being zoned as an R1 district rather than an RE district. What that did is it inadvertently made the fire station a non-allowable use. The town's proposed solution to revise the ordinance to specifically allow fire stations in the R1 district and address the specific requirements to the conditional use permit is very much acceptable to the district. With regard to the parking lot location, the current plan to locate the parking lot in the front of the station, we believe should be acceptable to the town in that numerous properties in the surrounding area do have the parking in the front. The original plan was to locate the parking at the rear and or at the side of the property, and the neighbors' objections and the ASCC concurrence to those objections led to the redesign and the current location out at the front of the property. And the current location is consistent with the neighboring non-residence properties. Regarding the size of the parking lot, we've discussed it at prior meetings and at both the ASCC and the Planning Commission meetings, what the existing parking is on site. And you can see there that there are currently 7 staff parking stalls, 1 ADA parking stall for a total of 8. And there are 2 pieces of equipment that are actually parked on the landscaped areas or the dirt in the back of the site. Parking required to accommodate the existing conditions. What they really need right now on site is 8 staff and 1 ADA and 2 visitors plus 4 equipment stalls for a total of 18. And what we're asking for now, the proposed parking is 10 staff, 2 ADA parking stalls, 2 visitor stalls, and 4 equipment stalls. The 10 staff, there are 5 staff presumably on staff at a time. And when you do have a shift change, you times 2, you have that many stalls that you need to be able to accommodate the incoming staff. The ADA parking stalls, there are a greater number of ADA parking stalls required now because you need a van stall and you also need a ADA accessible electric vehicle charging station. Regarding the existing redwood trees, the redwood trees need to be removed to accommodate proposed building and driveways. And the additional redwoods in the back are proposed for removal as requested by the neighbor due to the safety concerns and the potential damage that those trees have already caused to their property. All of the redwood trees on the property were planted by the district, so they're not old growth trees by any means. And in order to accommodate the parking lot in the front, it requires removal of some additional existing redwood trees. One of the trees that is much larger, which we've discussed here previously, is tree number 6, and that's raised some community concerns. At which point the arborists provided a supplemental report that addresses the following items, which have been discussed again here previously tonight, but I'll reiterate. The tree is not in good health. It has a split top and or what's called a codominant trunk and poses a safety concern in inclement weather. In that event, there's a potential that an evacuation route from the site and or the building could be compromised. Currently, that tree is also really too close to the building. I don't think when the firefighters planted that tree, they really realized how big it was going to get. In the end, it's just too close to the building, is potentially causing foundation damage. The parking lot improvement that we would like to construct and the required underground stormwater retention tank would affect the tree roots, even if the redesign were to not remove the tree. That's underground water retention tank, by the way, is intended to address long-term, long-standing stormwater issues and flooding on site, in particular in the southwest corner of the site that the neighbors have mentioned to us and are very concerned about. Regardless of the proposed project, based on the arborist report, the district now needs to remove the tree since it poses a safety concern. With regard to the groundwater contamination concern, the commissioner did raise a concern at the last meeting about prior groundwater contamination. And the district, one thing I do want to point out and be sure that everybody understands is the district's tank was removed, not because it was leaking, but it did not leak, but it was removed at the requirement of the state to remove underground storage tanks by 1998. And they did remove that storage tank, and no contamination was determined, and the site was cleared. The neighboring property, however, did have the former gas station. That was what had the leak. The contamination there was remedied and cleared, and the site was tested and cleared by the county in 2010. And I think that is the end of my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Chief Lindner, please.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you to all of you members of the Planning Commission, town staff, members of the various committees that are also on here, members of the public. So we keep talking that we've been in this process for over 2 years now. And I want to apologize from our point of view as far as the issues that were raised, the collaboration that could have happened at the beginning. You know, absolutely that could have been, should have been, would have been. We didn't look at it to that extent. We looked at it as a remodel, not a full-on rebuild of a fire station that could have that much of an impact, but it does. And so we apologize for that. It took not only time from out of us, but out of the town, out of the commissioners, out of the ASCC, out of the committees, et cetera. So for that reason, I think it took 2 years, but I think we're at the area now where I think we're comfortable and we have a good project. You know, it's long overdue. It's necessary. We've done the outreach. I believe we've answered all the questions and concerns to the best that we possibly can to make sure that we're able to provide the services that we do, that we're able to maintain a good relationship with our neighbors. I believe our relationship has grown with our neighbors because of this and because of the outreach and the discussions that we've had. So I think this has been a good thing. We've revised it as many times as we possibly could to accommodate everyone, the neighbors, ourselves, what the town, hopefully what the public would like to see. It may not be 100% perfect in everybody's eyes, but I believe this is good. This is what we need to make sure that we are providing the best service to the citizens of Portola Valley. There haven't been any concerns raised on the remodel itself, which we're very appreciative. And I think that we've answered everything else as far as the questions that have been raised, especially the last 2 questions or concerns from the last meeting. So I appreciate everything that's gone on. I appreciate your time on here, and we're all available for any questions. If we can answer, we will be more than happy. But that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Lindner. All right, commissioners, are there any questions for the clarifying questions for the applicant's presentation? And Mike, if you could unshare your screen. Thank you. So, Nicholas, you have your hand up? Why don't you start? You're muted right now.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So I very much appreciate the work that was done over the last little bit, both in terms of the analysis of the impacts from the tree and also the clarification pertaining to the underground storage tank case. I read the GeoTracker information that was posted, and I saw that the concentrations of benzene that were listed at the site of the underground storage tank case on the development site were 3.2 micrograms per liter. And I went and I checked what the environmental screening levels were for a residential structure, and they were 0.42, or about 6 times lower. I'm wondering if the 3.2 is wrongly stated as being on the fire station site, and whether I should be concerned that the concentrations of benzene are about 7 times higher than the environmental screening levels that are presently in place.
So through the chair, I'll take a stab at that question, and the applicant may want to chime in as well. Our office did a lot of research on the GeoTracker information and also did some talking to the underground storage division in the county of San Mateo. And we discovered that their records were really out of order in this particular situation. We don't have a lot of faith on the accuracy of some of the documents. So I think that that's the reason why the requirement to do some soil testing and groundwater testing is very important. And as you say, it's very likely that that was just that the 3 point whatever level that you mentioned was recorded on the adjacent site rather than this particular site. We just don't know. The records are not, are not our records, but we found a lot of discrepancies throughout the batch of documents.
The reason why I ask is the concentrations on benzene on the adjacent site are much higher than 3.2. So I'm wondering if 3.2 is accurate, or if I'm misreading or misunderstanding the fact that the concentrations that are reported are 7 times higher than the health-based screening levels.
So maybe I can answer your question in a more roundabout way. So I actually had a conversation with county staff related to the contaminant levels, and they concluded that based on the levels that they were seeing in the 2006 closure letter for the fire station, that they would not require any site management plan or any type of remediation or mitigation for those levels. And in fact, they also posed the possibility that the levels have been reduced since 2006, although they conceded that it probably was reported in 2000 and just carried over to the 2006 closure letter. And that if it was reduced to further levels than what was reported on that case closure letter, that they would have no concern or no additional requirements. That's the reason why there was no future notification for development or any other things that are typically required for a leaking underground storage tank. So all the signs point to the county had no concerns with those levels. Otherwise, they would have required more mitigation or remediation efforts. And so, as Cara noted, the best conclusion that we could come up with was that the leak actually transferred from 105 to 135. And the Lusk case was just strictly related to that tank removal in 1998 by the fire station.
So I won't dwell on it, but I don't doubt that it came from the one site to the other site. And needless to say, a site is defined where the contamination has come to be located, right?
I could agree with that
So
statement. Yes.
Right. And the concentrations have been made 30 times more stringent since 2006 to what they are right now. So it doesn't surprise me that what was okay in 2006 is perhaps different from what it is right now. But what I'm hearing you say, and what I'm hearing the applicant say, is that with the mitigation that is in place, one, that there will be sampling of soil and groundwater, is what I heard from town council, is that with that, and if the concentrations are still at their level that they were as reported, that wouldn't cause any concern on the town's part or on the county's part, and presumably on the applicant's part.
Do you want me to answer, Cara, or do you want me to?
Yeah. In this situation, we are deferring to the county in terms of the clearance for the underground storage tank case. So we don't do independent certification or compliance monitoring.
So the county said that having a concentration as reported doesn't cause any basis for concern and doesn't create a basis for any further mitigation beyond condition 12, notwithstanding the fact that it's 7 times higher than or 6 times higher than the environmental screening level.
The county staff did not express any concerns and did not suggest that any site management plan would be required for this current proposal. And they only required that if any additional contaminated soil or water was discovered through excavation, that they should be notified and they would proceed accordingly. That's how they answered the question posed.
So let me ask a final question, and that is, does condition 12 require sampling of soil and groundwater?
Yes.
I'd like you to read it and really answer it. Actually, let me ask the town attorney. Town attorney, does condition 12 require sampling and assessing about groundwater and soil conditions?
It does. Let me just read it into the record so we're all operating under the same set of language. So it says, prior to grading permit issuance, any contamination concerns shall be addressed through soil and groundwater testing and employment of best management practices to manage and dispose of any contaminated water and or soil discovered on site.
So let me ask you, does that mean that there will be soil and groundwater sampling?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
I think it can be.
That's what I needed.
Yes.
It doesn't say that there will be. It says that any concerns, and doesn't say that there are concerns. But if you say that that's what it means, let it be reflected in the record that that's what it means.
Yes.
But it does say that there's going to be testing.
To the extent that there are concerns.
Yeah,
and the town attorney has just clarified that there are concerns and therefore there will be testing. So I appreciate
yes.
it.
And it's written in passive voice. I generally don't like conditions written in passive voice. We can certainly convert it to an active voice tense, and I think it will be a little bit more clear.
Great, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Other commissioners, do you have clarifying questions of the applicant's proposal? Okay, seeing none.
Hey, Craig. Craig,
who-
it's Judith.
Yes, go ahead, Judith, please.
Yeah, the only one I really have is now, I think for the first time, I'm hearing that there's 2 ADA parking spaces required, one for a charging station and one for the actual van. I just want to confirm whether my recollection is incorrect and whether that's been part of the proposal all along.
Does the applicant want to answer?
That is true. That has always been the requirement, yes.
Okay, all right.
And it's
Thank
always
you.
been included in the project, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I had a few questions. From the last meeting, we did have some other questions, and I actually didn't see any additional information. One of them, we had asked about alternatives for parking. And I wondered if anything was pursued along those lines. Because one of the things with this project is obviously there's been a pretty large concern about the increase in the number of parking places. And so one of the avenues we were talking about was looking for alternatives for parking. Was anything pursued on that? I realize it's been 2 weeks, so, but I'm just curious if you have any more information.
And I'll address the chair. No, there hasn't. Once we heard the arborist report come back, we were comfortable with the number of spaces up front, keeping it on our own property, not having to impact anybody on the outside of our property with even remote safety concerns that we might have, that we were presenting in the previous discussions, as far as missing a call, being late to a call, just anything along that nature. We're comfortable with the fact that once a tree is removed, we're good with the number of spaces. We don't need more, but it is sufficient.
Okay. And then another thing we talked about last time was, finding some use for the tree, if indeed we decide tonight to remove the tree. And have you guys given any thought to that, since there was clear sort of community concern? One of the things we talked about sort of mitigating the concern was at least sort of honoring the tree, and I'll put that in quotes, but honoring the tree by sort of using it in some community-based way, whether it supports the firefighters or enhances the community. And I wondered if you guys follow.
I'm open to anything regarding that. I believe, based on the arborist report, that he said in his report that is basically worthless as far as any high-end materials. It would be more fence boards that it would be the equivalent of. But I am more than open to anything. I can't answer for our construction team or the length of time, but like I said, I'm open to anything.
Okay.
I'll reiterate that the indication in the arborist report indicates that because that tree grew so fast, the growth rings on it are probably in the range of 1 inch apart, and its quality is questionable. And certainly its quality is very questionable until you actually cut into that tree and actually see what is going on there. There's also potential for heartwood rot inside that you won't see again until you cut into that tree.
Yeah, I think some of the things that were suggested was the possibility of, leaving one of the rounds and maybe preserving it sort of in memory of the tree or some such. Again, I'm sensitive to trying to, honor some of the comments on, the people who were concerned about taking down the tree.
Easy enough to do. Thank you.
Yeah. So then, was there any conversation about having the drive-through in the back to sort of reduce the impact on the scenic corridor? I know we didn't want to put, the immediate neighbors didn't want to put parking in the back, but was there any discussion among the architects about putting the drive-through in the back?
The drive-through was originally in the back, and it was not met very favorably.
Yeah, we discussed the parking in the back at length early on in the discussion, and there was a second to the sheriff's office. That was probably the next most critical factor on neighbor concerns with route, with noise, with lighting, with just generalized displeasure towards it, but also with the landscape that could potentially be affected on that backside, which has been in place for quite a few years and was very much emphasized that it was wished to be kept like that rather than putting a drive-through on the backside of it.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to separate out the parking from the drive-through.
But yeah, it was.
Because I understand the issue with the drive-through and lights and stuff, but the drive-through seemed like potentially a different issue. So okay. And then I guess the last thing, just because we mentioned it, and Chief, thank you for sort of acknowledging that all this could have gone better, especially given COVID. I was wondering, were there results from outreach to the community? I think you guys obviously did a great job of doing outreach to the neighbors. I was wondering what kind of results you got back from the sort of general community, because we're sort of now at the last hour, and what we as commissioners are weighing is new general community input versus the work that you've done with the neighbors to try to alter the plan. And so I was curious, did you guys get much feedback in that sort of open community meeting?
So with regard to the Zoom meeting that we did have, the initial Zoom meeting, the majority of the comments came from the adjacent neighbors.
Okay, so you didn't really, for whatever reason, weren't able to get a sort of the general community involved.
The community was invited to that meeting, but the majority of the comments came from the adjacent neighbors.
Yeah, got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
It was a 1,000-foot radius notification, as I recall, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Through the chair, there was 1,000-foot notice provided to the project team for that neighborhood outreach meeting early on.
Right.
Yeah, and I think as we've discussed, I mean, this is a pretty special project. This maybe needed a little bit more sort of public notice across the town. It might have made where we are now a little bit easier. Okay, so are there any other commissioner comments or questions for the applicants before I open it up to public comments?
No,
Judith, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, great. All right, so with that, I would like to open it up to the public. There are currently 16 attendees. And Judith Murphy, you're up. Welcome.
Thank you. The Conservation Committee had submitted a revised report specifically for this meeting, and unfortunately didn't make it into the packet, although I know that it's customary for them to forward it on to you all individually. I only got confirmation that it happened in the middle of the day today, so I was a little concerned about that. So I'm going to just do a quick high point thing here.
Yeah, and I think we tend to read these things, Judith. So
I know you absolutely do. I know that you do. So some of this is for the public that's attending then, because it wasn't in the public packet.
Great, go ahead.
So the obvious conservation is very supportive of all the building improvements requested. They need them, they should have them. There's no question about that. The discussion tonight has not yet reflected that in this report, we no longer oppose removal of tree number 6. You guys were amazingly diligent in terms of looking at that, the information that came up, the arborist report. We have no desire to be intransigent. We understand that tree number 6 must come out, and we gracefully back off on that, okay? And we had already approved the removal of a number of redwoods from behind. So we do try to be reasonable as these things come along. However, we continue to have problems with the landscaping plans. There are two pieces especially. the number of parking places, they continue to ask for 10 parking places for 5 staff. And we know there's overlap. It's because of overlap, but the overlap is an hour every 48 hours or every 72 if they shift to 72-hour shifts, which there is some talk about. So to tear up the additional landscape needed for 5 parking places for 1 hour every 2 or 3 days just seems to be very disproportionate to me, continues to be disproportionate. The other parking places I get, but those 5 I do not get. The drive-through, we've talked about the drive-through many times. We were misrepresented a little bit. They've said that we asked to have have it move from the back to the front. Conservation did not say that. Conservation has said from the beginning that this doesn't seem like an essential thing. They have a number of reasons they would like to have it, and I hear those reasons, and I don't find them terribly convincing. They don't want to back up. I understand that. They can't drive through. I don't understand why they can't, they have to take those engines out with some regularity. Why, when they have a visiting engine, they can't take their engine out and make a drive around a little circle and let that engine go through the drive-through bays. That's what they have a drive-through bay for. They're getting an extra drive-through bay. And I just have trouble with it. The other reason they have said is that when they're out at a fire, they have a covering engine come. And I understand that. And the covering engine can't go into one of those drive-through bays because when they leave, the door locks behind them. But the people who come in the covering engine certainly have the keys to go inside the station. And I do not understand why they can't open the door and for the engine as well. And I think part of it is if Homeland Security is driving some of this, if the reason we're adding a 3rd bay is for Homeland Security level protection of these engines, then to have the covering engine sitting on a drive-through driveway right in the front of the thing on the main thoroughfare immediately unprotected doesn't seem to be consistent with what they're trying to accomplish for Homeland Security. The last thing I want to say is that the elevation that they show you, page 68, does not look accurate to me. They carefully note that it's not to scale, but when you look at it, what's shown on the far left as the landscaping between that driveway and Portola Road, it's not, I don't think it's that wide. It doesn't show that wide on the plan. And the other thing is when you look at it, it looks like there's maybe 5, maybe 6 parking places in front there and not the 9 that there are out there. So I think that's a misleading elevation. And if you looked at that and think, oh, this doesn't look so bad, then I think it's not quite accurate. And it is true that there's parking out front in many other locations right nearby, but most of those locations have the parking and the hardscape quite set back from the road itself because the town has required that. It's not that way at the corner because it predates the town. It's not that way at Ramey's because it predates the town. It's not that way at Roberts, but everywhere else where the town has had something to say, everything is set back or the grade change has been there. So at a minimum, I would ask that if you can't see it the way we see it on the parking spaces and you can't see it the way we see it on the drive-through, please try, you could move those front parking spaces and the drive-through back a few feet. If you lose that small screening between the parking places and the building, not much is lost aesthetically. And if you gain those couple of feet along the frontage where the fence is, then you can put in some shrubbery that does a little more to soften and screen the expanse of the pavement and the parking spaces. And I think that should be easy to do and would have a dramatically improved frontage for the thing. Thank you very much. Appreciate your listening to me.
Thank you, Judith. Bill, I saw you sort of had your hand up. What I'd like to do is go through all the public comments. If you can just keep track of the questions that you'd like to answer, when we're done with public comment, I will give you as the applicant a chance to respond. Because what I don't want to do is I don't really want to get into back and forth between, you know, each presentator, but I definitely want to give you a chance to respond. Okay, Carolyn Vertonga, you're up next. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, good evening, sorry. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Targ for exercising his due diligence. And I hope that this committee will require written confirmation from San Mateo County with their findings. I find this very concerning that we go by verbal explanations. Secondly, I want to comment on community outreach. And I feel that Portola Valley has failed again. I have been a member of the low density citizens. This was an organization built in 2002. And the difference was the whole town knew about it. And now it's only the people by the fire station who know what's going on. And it's not just the remodel or the upgrade of the fire station, but it's rezoning. And people in Portola Valley do not know what's going on. So these are my comments. I also want to thank Judy for a very detailed comments that she made. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Cardinal, you are up next. Welcome, Dave.
Hi there. I think it's easy for people to forget we're not talking about a dentist's office or a hair salon. We're talking about the people who are there to save our lives. So to that, I'd make a couple points. One is I trust the Conservation Committee to do their job and the Town Council to do their job. And I trust Chief Lindner and his people to know how to save our lives. So I really hope that nobody calls 911 and gets told, we'll be a little late because we have to find the keys to the door, or we have to make a 3-point turn in the driveway. I also hope that people take time to go to a fire exercise and see all the vehicles and all the chaos. And we worry about fires and wildfires. They're chaotic, large situations, and a lot of stuff is going on. And there's a lot of big trucks and vehicles. And I think that's something that it's not just shift changes that requires space. It's a lot of things. So I can't see any reason anymore to get in the way of this. It just seems like a no-brainer to me, unless we want them to move the fire station someplace else that wants them.
Is that your comment?
Yep, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Jan Montjoy, you're up next. Welcome, Jan.
I think I'm mute. Am I unmuted
Yep.
now?
Yep, you're good. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm just going to have to put it out there like I feel. This has been one of the most stressful and emotional 2 years of my life. It's been extremely difficult for me because from the very first presentation, the shrubbery border that has provided me with the privacy and has protected the value of my property for over 40 years has been in jeopardy. At first by the road that was going to come around in back, and by the parking that was going to be there. And I am so relieved to find parking in front, so incredibly relieved to find that it looks like that's what's going to happen. But the process, as I said, has been extremely difficult for me, very stressful. I want to go back a little history. When I first bought my house in 1973, there was only an empty lot there. I had no expectation of a fire station being there. And when one evening around 1976, there was a doorbell ring or a knock on the door, I've forgotten which. And the man at the door was Chief Stan Larson, who said, "I'm going to be your new neighbor. Is there anything I can do that to offset any concerns that you have?" And I said, "Yes, I want landscaping between us for privacy." Well, I was a young, naive homeowner at the time. I did not know about this process that we're just going through now. I did not know that I had the right to put it in writing. And I would like to address that. I can't tell you how strongly this shrubbery border is for my privacy and the property value of my home. When the fire station first came in there and there was nothing between us, it was like living behind a slum. Excuse me for being blunt about it, my dear fire department neighbors, but it was a terrible sight. And I need that shrubbery border to protect the property value that I have worked so hard to maintain for 40 years. And I would like to correct my oversight. I wasn't wise enough at the time to have that put into writing, but I would like to be a condition of approval that that shrubbery border be maintained in good order for now and the foreseeable future. And I thank you for your consideration. I also
you,
want
Janet.
to end by saying thank you to the fire department for its very sincere outreach and intentions with we neighbors. It has been a good experience. And like the chief had said, I think it's improved relationships. And I have embraced and welcomed that opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Turcott, you're up next. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to first comment on something Judith Murphy had noted, and that is the challenge with this meeting and others, the town council, for example, for residents to communicate with each other. The agenda comes out after the opportunity for public submissions to be included in the packet. And I just want to let Judith know what I've recently started to do tentatively and with trepidation is to post my letters on the PV forum. And I found that to be so far a great experience. It's stimulated, I think, thoughtful dialogue with people that I wouldn't have otherwise interacted with. And so I would encourage everyone to consider doing that. It's very helpful to understand the perspective of other residents. And it's tough to do when there's only a 3-minute time slot to get information across with no opportunity for graphics or anything like that. So please consider using that forum. And if there's other mechanisms that people know of, let us know. The main thing I wanted to comment on was something I've been commenting on throughout this process since getting involved. And that's my concern about the implication of the change in zoning ordinance for residents of R1. Now, of the issues in the town I'm following, I have to say this is the most opaque. And I find it to be very inaccessible. And I think that might explain some of the frustration and talking past each other that possibly has been going on. I've been told by a couple of different sources that questions I and others have raised have been answered, and yet I've been following attentively and hadn't heard the answers. There's also hasn't been reference to the issues I've raised in the minutes. I learned today, since submitting my letter, that the terminology I've been using has connotations that I wasn't aware of, and I wonder if perhaps the language has been a barrier and has prevented me from communicating really what my concern is. So let me try again without the loaded terminology. One thing to make clear is that, the possibility that the zoning change might result in fire stations sprouting throughout the R1 zones is not the concern I have. That's been discussed a lot at the meeting. Personally, that's not something I'm very focused on or worried about. My concern has been something different. So let me try again using different language. My impression, and I can't say that this is a fact, I can just say that I've seen passing reference to things that have generated this impression, so it could be wrong. But my impression is that there are categories of residential zones. And a zone that's exclusively residential is viewed differently than a zone that's residential with allowance for other non-residential
So Bob,
use. Yeah.
I know you have more to say, but I'm going to ask you to try to be brief and wrap it up because your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you. I will do.
Thank you.
So that's been my impression. And so these are my questions. Is this distinction true? Is it relevant? From the state level, is that a distinction that's made? Is the staff aware of examples where state mandates have applied to one of those residential categories I just described, but not the other? That's really my concern. And the primary concern underlying all of this is whether there are unintended, non-obvious consequences or potentially secondary effects with the zoning change that haven't been discussed, that we aren't aware of. And if there are, given the numbers of residents involved, shouldn't we, wouldn't we be better off rezoning to AP rather than changing the definition of R1? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to comment before I close public comments? So I think somebody, you keep flashing on and off, but I think there's somebody, a Bob, somebody here with your hand raised. Go ahead. Would you identify yourself once you get unmuted?
Sure. This is Bob Schultz, a neighbor of the fire station. Sorry
Great.
about
Welcome, Bob.
multiple clicks there.
Yeah.
I just, good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to reiterate our support for the project as it was presented to you. We favor the fire station wording of the text amendment and the parking in front. Because of the loss of so many redwoods in the rear, and it's basically a direct screening impact onto our property, we definitely look forward to working with the fire station on the landscaping plan so as to better mitigate the loss of those trees. And we'd also, I sent a letter earlier that had 3 additional conditions of approval that we'd like to ask the Planning Commission to consider. I don't know if you've seen those, but the first, I think that they're actually applicable to the neighborhood in general and would be useful for all. The first one is that, again, regarding landscaping, that town staff would evaluate the health and screening effectiveness of the landscaping at the fire station once the project is complete after 2 and 5 years. And then any plants that are not performing well would be replaced or otherwise remediated. And then, so that's a big one for us and probably from everyone around the station. The other 2 items were actually proposed by the fire station at some point, but it seems like they would fit into that big list of conditions of approval. The second one is that motion and time controls be installed for not only the exterior, which is already present as a condition of approval, but also the interior for the apparatus bays, because they have very high windows. The fire station had proposed that there would be electronic controls, but we would just like to make sure that happens so that at night and when the garages are not being used, those lights shut off and there's no light leakage or minimal light leakage. They also mentioned the use of blinds and those top windows. That would be great that those get placed there. And then thirdly, the fire station uses a system to extract the exhaust from their big diesel engines and their multiple engine fire engines. And it's a big whirring motor that sucks that exhaust out and blows it out into the air above the station. It can be heard all around the neighborhood. It can be heard in our home with the windows closed. And at some point, they suggested that there was a sound muffler that could also be installed when they upgrade that system for the new apparatus day. So we'd like to ask that is done and that we just make sure it gets done. So in closing, I guess I would just say, I mean, there's a huge amount of expansion here on a tiny lot. There's no perfect plan, but we feel the current one is workable. We thank the fire station for working with all the neighbors. And you know, literally though, it's taken already over 2 years to get to this point. So we really ask the Planning Commission to approve the plan as it is and give the fire station the tools they need to continue to protect our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, is there any other public comment? All right, so seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment. I'd like to give the applicant a chance to respond. So Bill, did you want to respond to a couple of the questions that came up?
I did. Just to reiterate real quickly, the landscape out front. There is a manzanita hedge that is shown on the landscape, current landscape submittal. And just to be clear that there is something that has been proposed out there. It sounded like there was a feeling that there's nothing that has been proposed out there, but it is proposed, and we would certainly welcome any additional comments from any of the community as far as the neighbors are concerned, what kind of plant material they'd like to see around their properties, both on the south property line and the west property line, as well as out front. With regard to the drive-through, it was eliminated from the rear of the property, mostly at the request of the south neighbor, because that she would have been impacted the most. The drive-through is not necessarily a nice to have item. It's really a necessary item. It's for visiting engines. And while that term visiting sounds like other station members are coming by to say hi and have a cup of coffee or something like that with Station 8, that's not the case. The reason that they're visiting generally is for two things. One would be for training, and one would be to cover the station once the Station 8 firefighters are out of the station. And it's not always that station is covered by apparatus or staff from the Woodside Fire Protection District. It can be from Menlo Park, it can be from Palo Alto, it can be from CAL FIRE, whomever, and they don't have keys to open the app bay doors. So they don't have it, and they don't have potentially controllers to get through the app bay there. So using the app bay as a turnaround is not a viable solution. Some sort of a drive that allows vehicles of the size that those engines are to navigate and make a turn, and make a safe turn, by the way, by not backing up perhaps, which is unsafe in any vehicle, to be able to get through the site and navigate the site. That's all. I just wanted to clarify those items, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. But one other thing that was mentioned, there was something about reducing the buffer between the parking and the building to increase the margin between the road, the area, and the possibility.
It is, sure.
Great, thank you. Okay, so with that, I'd like to move on to the discussion with the commissioners. But before I do that, Laura, one thing I would like to ask is, could you go through we kind of talked about this last time, and the commission, I think we came to agreement on leaving it R1, because people talk about this as a zoning change, but we're actually just sort of cleaning it up, and we're technically not making a zoning change. But would you kind of go through the issues of, R1 versus not R1? Because I think it's important that everybody understand it. And I think the answers have been spread out over time. I think you've answered a lot of those questions, but maybe if you could just do it in kind of a concise way, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I can provide the summary of those items that staff evaluated at the last meeting, and then maybe Cara in a moment can speak to the issue around that Bob Turcotte raised around the mixed use zones and some of that information.
Great, thank you.
So this is some of the information about why staff thought it's not as favorable to consider rezoning the site to either AP or CC, administrative professional, or our commercial zoning. So we don't envision that any other R1 properties would be affected. And Kara can talk a little bit more about this question around mixed use or multifamily and how those terms have been used. So there's no other fire stations are being proposed. There's only one identified in the general plan, and the proposed zoning text amendment says that it has to be identified in the general plan. Having the use as a conditional use rather than as a permitted use in the AP zone would provide the town more authority to address impacts. So the conditional use permit is what we're going through here, where we talk about those kinds of impacts like light and noise on the neighbors. This solution brings the R1 properties more in line with the uses permitted in the RE zone. So we discussed this, that these uses are allowed in the RE zone. The AP zone would allow the sheriff's office substation, and that use was strongly opposed by the immediate neighbors. We talked about the fact that an ADU would be permitted on site under either scenario under state law, so there's not a distinction there. We analyzed to the degree that we could the development standards for the AP and the CC zone, and it could potentially work in terms of development standards, but perhaps not for the landscaping requirement. And so they might still need a variance for the project, even if it was zoned as AP or CC. And then in regards to the general plan, we have the Nathorst Triangle Plan, which is the area plan part of the general plan. And this particular site is identified as institutional, and it's the only parcel with that classification. And it's described as uses such as churches, a fire station, and similar uses. It does not include offices or commercial development. And there are other classifications in the plan area that do include office and commercial. So staff concluded we thought it was reasonable to think that it was intentional to limit the uses on this parcel to that category. And if we did a zoning map amendment to change the designation, then it could be inconsistent, or it will certainly at least be unclear in terms of its consistency with the general plan. We also find that in our experience in other communities, it's very common for public safety facilities such as fire stations to be located in residential districts. That's by design, because the fire stations are intended to serve those residential areas. So it is common for fire stations in other communities to be located in their version of R1, single family zoning districts. So that's the summary of some of the previous discussion that we've had.
Great, thank you. And I think that's helpful. I think that just sort of puts all the things we've been talking, kind of together at one time. Kara, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I wanted to just clarify the questions from Bob Turcott about mixed use zoning. And I think the concern that this particular zoning amendment would result in a de facto mixed use zone. And secondarily, that if this were considered mixed use zoning, that would then allow for some increased residential density. So to answer the first part of the question, typically we do not consider an R1 zone that allows certain institutional uses to be classified as a mixed use zone. Our individual local code does not have a definition of mixed use zoning, but most cities do not consider your standard R1 single family zone classification to be mixed use zoning. Generally, mixed use zoning is something like a residential multifamily building on top of a commercial space or on top of a retail space. Generally, mixed use zoning includes two types of uses that are being used or that are cited on a single parcel and used concurrently. With mixed use, with a single family zoning, you typically have a set of permitted uses, single family zone, and then other uses that can be used as a substitute for those single family uses. And as Laura mentioned, it's very common for single family uses and zones to include things like schools and parks and libraries and other public facilities. And that does not convert a single family zone to a mixed use zone. The second part of the question was, even if it did convert a single family zone to a mixed use zone, what is the impact of that? And I heard a concern expressed that mixed use zoning might permit some increased density. And currently, the state does not have special rules regarding mixed use zones. And I apologize for the train going by in the background. But currently, the state does not have special allowances for mixed use zones to permit even additional density than what is allowed by the local law. It's conceivable that the state could adopt such a law, and in which case there could be a preemption issue, and it would trump the local laws, because in this arena, state law generally preempts local laws. However, the state could also just as easily do that for single family zoning. And we started this meeting out with a concern about SB 9 and SB 10, which actually does take single family zones and essentially creates multifamily zones. So in my opinion, even if this were classified as mixed use zoning, and we don't believe, it certainly is not under our code, and we don't believe that the state or a court would view this as mixed use zoning. But if it were viewed in such a way, there's no current law that would allow for increased residential density or increased density on this in an R1 zone. So I hope that clears up those two issues. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so with that, I'd like to bring it back to the commissioners. We discussed the R1 zoning last time. I think we had consensus, but if any of the commissioners have additional comments or concerns, we should probably bring those up. I think we have the question about the tree removal, and we have some questions about parking and landscape that I think we need to make sure we resolve tonight, and then obviously anything else that the commissioners would like to bring up. So who would like to go first? Shall I call on you? All right, John, please go ahead.
I guess it's so. I believe we resolved the zoning last time. It's a bit of a Band-Aid. It's pretty restrictive. I probably would have made it less restrictive just because it's less restrictive elsewhere in town. But as Laura pointed out, that doesn't completely solve the problem either. So we need the conditional use permit to get the building standards in place and control those. So I'm fine with what we decided last time on that. With respect to the tree, I know I surmised what was in the arborist report, that the tree, once you move stuff from the back to the front, the tree was a goner, and I think that just proved out. So it's unfortunate, I guess, although as people noted, I think I noted last time, given that we expect the fire station to be around for years, that tree is going to have a problem with it sometime and cause some damage. So I think the tree's got to go if we want the fire station there. In terms of the parking, I don't think my position has changed on that. I would much, as opposed to trying to come up with just the minimal amount they can get by with, I would happily give them a little bit extra because we want that fire station to be around for a while. Maybe they'll get some more equipment to make us safer. And I don't think, taking out a couple of spots is going to dramatically change what it looks like from the front. So I'd much rather say, let's give them what they asked for. I'd rather err on the side of making it a really good fire station, because that's what we need. And with respect to the landscaping, to be honest, I think, we've got the condition in there that the ASCC is going to work with them. And two members of the ASCC, it's condition number 8, that they'll be working with them on the landscape plan. And I think that's sufficient in terms of protecting the concerns that have been raised. Those are my thoughts.
Great, thanks, John. Nicholas, you want to go next? You're still muted. Better.
So there are a handful of items that I think are worth visiting here. In no particular order, there was a issue of question of reclaimed wood. The arborist report identified that the wood may or may not be useful for something other than fence boards. I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, and would like to the extent feasible, have the wood applied to some appropriate reclaimed purpose, perhaps with input from the Conservation Committee. On the issue of the Conservation Committee, I noted that the letter did identify that they did not have an objection to the removal of the tree, which I think in combination with the arborist report was very helpful into our thinking. They did include reference to maintenance and potentially expansion of the vegetative buffer that was identified. It may be appropriate for the Conservation Committee to have consultation along with a couple of members to be of the ASCC to be included in that. And I didn't hear objection to the vegetative buffer. I think it's more granular, of course, than is appropriate for our consideration here. There was a issue that was raised from the public regarding sound buffers, and I believe that the sound buffers on the equipment itself. Again, it is more granular and we didn't delve into it, but my thought was that it would be helpful to have that be a consideration and to implement sound buffering to the extent practicable. And there was a suggestion of reporting the sampling, the environmental sampling that the town attorney assures us will take place in groundwater and soil, be transmitted to San Mateo County Department of Environmental Health. And I thought that was a useful suggestion. I have no other comments beyond that.
Great, thank you very much. Judith, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, first, I want to reiterate support for the fire station. You're invaluable to the community. It hasn't been an easy process with COVID. And I appreciate the comments you made about the process maybe not being perfect. You know, we're not looking for perfect, we're looking for a robust process. And I think now with the additional submissions, I'm pretty comfortable. So just going through in quick order, I'm comfortable with the R1 zoning with a CUP. It is sad that the tree is not really viable where it is. Would like to see the reclaimed wood used locally in some reasonable capacity. I do think, I don't want to micromanage here, so I want to support the fire station as much as we can. So I'm gonna, I don't have a strong basis to have a strong preference whether we have 18 parking spaces or 16. I think they need, you know, what they need. But I really do want to see a lot of thought around the landscaping. I believe that area of town is a bit out of sync with, you know, our general attentiveness to having natural effects around that corridor. And even though that corridor, that part of the corridor isn't pristine by any means, it is what it is, to the extent that they can work with the ASCC and the neighbors to soften, I think that could mitigate what could otherwise be a pretty harsh pavement heavy area. So that's important to me, but I think if they commit to work with the ASCC on that, it would come to the right place. Groundwater, I'm going to have to defer to the experts there. It sounded like that came to a reasonable approach. And in terms of attending to the neighbor's request about sound buffering, if that's a reasonable cost benefit, I think that would make a lot of sense for everybody. So I'll stop there and thank everybody for the additional information they've been providing on behalf of the fire station today.
Thanks, Judith. Anne, you want to go ahead?
Sure. As we discussed before, I am in favor of the R1 change to the zoning to allow fire stations under this conditional use permit, which has all these conditions and reviews as we're evidencing here. I did want to bring up one new thing. One of the public comments was that if we're going to change the R1 zoning, that we should have notified everyone that lives in R1 and not just the people that live within the fire district, because now their lot is getting possibly has a new CUP. But for me, I may have thought about that, and as a resident, you know, you want to be notified about things that could affect you, and that's why the town sends out letters to people within 1,000 feet of a project in case they're not paying attention to every planning and ASCC and town meeting. But then on the other hand, as a resident, you also want to just vote for people on a town council who appoint a planning commission and an ASCC and just take care of things, right? And not bother you with every little thing. And for me, this falls into the, if I lived in R1, I don't, I live in RE, but if I did, I would just like people that are paying attention to these kind of things to take care of it. I think the probability that, you know, some other neighbor is going to find a fire station suddenly next to them is very, very low. As Laura said, there's only one fire station kind of permitted on the general plan. It's under this conditional use permit, which is very, I don't want to say onerous, but it is. There's many, many conditions that have to get met. So I feel like it's sensible as a resident that we just make this what I would consider a very minor zoning change. Can I call it on our own? And then as we talked about last meeting, I support the fire station pretty much as it is. You know, it's a nice tree. Sorry it has to go, but I was affected by it. It was planted by firefighters, you know, it did not predate the development on this lot. I feel like it's almost a shame. The firefighters would probably be kicking themselves if they knew that tree they planted is now causing a headache for the current fire chief. There's many other redwood trees. the tree may not survive. Now the arborist has said that. And then I definitely, you know, the ASCC reviewed this, and they regularly review projects for the benefit of the building footprint and the trees, including heritage trees, and they let people take them down when needed, and the parking. So I want to respect their decision. And, you know, as I mentioned before, usually on these conditional use permits, what we're most attentive, Planning Commission is that there is enough parking and don't try to cut them down. So I want to kind of start with what the fire chief needs and go with that. I love the idea using the tree. I definitely don't want to make it a condition. You know, who knows what the tree is going to be when it comes down, and I don't want it to be an extra burden on the fire department and their architects. You know, I think it's great if it could be used, though, if a community effort could be put forth to do something with the tree, but not put the burden on the fire station. That's all.
Great, thanks, Anne. So my comments are, first of all, you know, thank you, Chief Lindner, for, you know, your patience in this process. I know it's been a long go, and to the architects as well. Obviously, the town's got strong support for our local fire department. We, you know, we love you guys. So, you know, we're trying to come to the right conclusion. And I know it's a long and onerous process, but, you know, we're getting there. So in terms of the tree, I agree with my other commissioners. I mean, I think we have enough information now to basically approve or allow the removal of the tree. I would like to see the applicant work with the Conservation Committee to try to come up with some kind of mitigation. And it may be small. It may be as small as we're going to cut around and, you know, seal it and put it someplace. Say, you know, this was the redwood tree that used to be in front of the fire station. So I think once you take the tree down, if you could work with the Conservation Committee and see if they can come up with a suggestion. I'm not looking for an onerous thing, and I really don't want to make this a strong binding condition, but I think we can trust you guys to do the right thing. But I think that would be sort of a goodwill gesture to the community. The landscaping plan, I have more issues with, in the sense it seems pretty vague to me. And I know the ASCC is going to work on it. I really would like to see if it's possible to remove the buffer between the building and the parking and get as much space between the parking area and the road and the scenic corridor. Because that's really one of the things that we hold dear in the town. So I think when you're working with the two ASCC members to work on the landscaping, I'd like to leave that as an opening for them to work with you guys to the degree you can work on screening that. Because really, I mean, all the other parking that we've done since then sits farther away from the scenic corridor than this is going to be. And I think that's been one of the concerns. It's in some ways a little bit tied to the tree, because I think people are seeing both the tree going and a lot of pavement going out front. So the more we can do to mitigate that sort of, we just poured a lot of, you know, asphalt out front, the better. The sample testing, I think Nicholas has stated it well. I'd just like to see that happening. The sound reduction and the maintenance of the landscaping, at least the maintenance, I was going to ask Laura, is that a reasonable CUP condition?
Yes, it definitely is. And I could suggest some language if you would like me to.
Yeah, I think when we get to that place, I'd like to see some issues here. And then I'm going to assume that the applicant knows best what they can do in terms of trying to do noise reduction that's reasonable. Certainly, I know as a neighbor who's got an air conditioner that runs, it seems nonstop, it can be pretty annoying. So I think anything you could do to help reduce that noise, I think would be greatly appreciated by the neighbors. So I think those are my comments. I would definitely like to see this project move forward to the council and get you guys going in terms of getting it built. So Laura, what are the next steps? We need to do the CUP wording, and are there other things we need to do in terms of the resolution to basically vote on this tonight?
It sounds like you have consensus on the main items and we're to the point of looking at some of the specific conditions. So
Yeah.
I have some recommendations related to the conditions for the commission to consider.
Okay.
And then if you're ready, you would want to make a motion to adopt the resolution with whatever changes that you would want to make to the conditions. And then that package would be forwarded to the council for their consideration.
Great. So
So
do you
for
want to
the-
make those recommendations?
Yeah, that'd be great. So this is what I've got, I think, that people have talked about or the community has talked about. For existing condition number 8 to change that language that we would want to increase the buffer between the parking lot in the road to the extent feasible, subject to approval by 2 members of the ASCC with consultation with the Conservation Committee and with the adjacent neighbors. Then for condition number 12, we want to update that language to be just in the active voice to confirm that the testing would take place and just remove any ambiguity with that. If you wanted to do something for the sound buffering for the diesel exhaust, you could do something that they should buffer to the extent feasible, and you could leave that condition language to my satisfaction, for example, so to the satisfaction of the planning director, and then they would submit materials to us that we would evaluate consistent with your intent in the discussion. I don't know if there wasn't much discussion about lighting controls for the interior lights in the apparatus bay. We could treat that in a similar fashion and say to the extent feasible to minimize or control that lighting in the apparatus bay for the sake of the neighbors. For landscape maintenance, this may be a case where it would be appropriate to have a more formal tool for the landscape maintenance. And so, for example, we could have a landscape maintenance agreement that would say that they would maintain the landscape for the life of the project. And there's some simple form language that we could use for that. We could leave that subject to the town attorney's authority to develop that language. We could include an evaluation of that landscape, for example, at perhaps 18 months and 5 years. So they would need to make sure that the landscape is growing in and maintain it to a reasonable standard, and then replant anything that's not successful during that time. So I think that would be reasonable for a project of this size and is commonly done on larger commercial projects in other communities that have more such projects. And then for the reclaimed wood, if you wanted to add a condition, you could just include a soft condition, like they could explore uses for the reclaimed wood, seek input from the Conservation Committee. So if you want something to be reflected in the record, you could do something with softer language just so that they consider it.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, comments on what Laura's proposing for the CUP?
I liked all those.
Okay. John?
They were fine with me.
Okay. Judith?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh.
I support those.
Okay, go ahead, John.
So the only thing I wanted to make sure is on the soft comments, or some of the ones we were adding, I might have just left it up to the discretion of the applicant on those, because I tend to trust them on that. And I just want to make sure that, we're not, that they're allowed to, at their discretion means that they don't have to spend a lot of money on it. If it costs more money to a huge amount of money to take care of that tree and cut it into pieces, I wouldn't think that was necessary. If we could do it at cost, it doesn't cost them anything, I think that would be good too. But I don't want to put a lot of cost restrictions on the fire department.
So John, are you okay, like on the tree, Laura explore, so she's off, and I'm comfortable with what they're going to do is explore, and they may or may not come up with a solution. So that's clearly on the.
I was okay with those. I was just adding my context in terms of how I was interpreting them for the record.
Right, but the reason I'm bringing this up is she also had other conditions like the landscape stuff, which was that she was going to review what they did in terms of sound mitigation. So you're comfortable with not leaving that to the applicant?
Oh, yes, sorry, yes, you are correct, yes.
Good, okay, great. Nicholas?
I've got two things. I would include language that's precatory of the form to the extent practicable for the soft items that we've been talking about, but actually include them as conditions. And I'd also like the sampling to be submitted to the county.
Okay, great, thank you. And I just had one comment. I felt like on the frontage, I think having ASCC be the lead with some consultation from conservation is enough. I don't think we need to get all the neighbors and everybody involved. This is the frontage. The stuff in the back, I'm happy to have the fire department work with the neighbors, but at least in terms of the frontage, I think the Conservation Committee's got a strong sense for, we're trying to preserve the scenic corridor to the extent we can. Okay, so with that, I think we're ready for a motion. So I would entertain a motion.
I would motion that we approve the resolution recommending approval, conditional use permit for the and amendments to municipal code, the architectural review and site development for the remodel in addition to the existing fire station with the additional conditions as outlined by our planning director, Laura Russell.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Judith?
The only question I have is whether that also wraps in your and Nicholas's comments at the end. I just want to make sure that those are integrated into what we're approving.
So John, I think that was, she was just asking you to clarify, in addition to what Laura said, both Nicholas and myself added just small tweaks to what she said, and you're comfortable with adding those in?
Yes, I am. Is that a friendly amendment of some sort? I don't think I can't friendly amend myself.
I think it was a clarification
Yes.
on
So
what you
yes,
were.
I was intending to directly answer that question, that yes, we include those items, the testing and your concerns also.
Great. Any other discussion? Anne? Nicholas? Okay, great. Can we have a vote? Would you do the roll call, please? Either
Commissioner
Laura or
Goulden?
Cara?
Aye.
Commissioner Haskell,
Aye.
Commissioner Targ,
Aye.
Vice Chair Koff-Sill,
Aye.
and Chair Taylor.
Aye. All right, that's great. So the motion passes 5-0. Thank you all for your, I don't want to say patience, but willing to work through the process with all of this. And I would say the same thing for all the attendees that have stuck with us through 3 meetings. Thank you for all your comments and joining in to help move this process forward. So Chief Linder, congratulations. And we'll look forward to this going to the council and then seeing you guys breaking ground on some new fire station.
Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it. We're sorry to put everybody through so many meetings, but we appreciate all the feedback and we want to make it right. So there's nothing, all of your suggestions are definitely points taken.
Yeah, thank you. And I sort of stated mine in the sense I trust you guys now that you kind of have a sense for what we're looking for, that you will do the right thing. So I think we've got a great sort of community effort here. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Appreciate it.
So with that, I'm going to close agenda item 1 and move to agenda item 2, which is commission reports. So are there any commission reports?
If I may, do we need a vote on the common sense exemption, or are we treating common sense exemption as we would a categorical exemption, which doesn't need a vote and adoption of findings?
Cara?
Yes, so the findings for the common sense exemption are included in the resolution that you just adopted. So
Thank you.
you have made that.
Are you comfortable with that, Nicholas?
It's good enough for the town attorney. It's good enough for me.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so moving on to agenda item number 2. Are there any commission reports? All right, so seeing none, hearing none. Is there any public comment on commission reports? Just I try to, provide public comment. So Caroline, I see that you have your hand up. Are you asking to speak about commission reports? Or is your hand just left over?
You want me to unmute her and we can find out what?
Yeah, sure, because if,
Thank you for noticing, but I think this is a technical error again. Thank you.
okay, no problem. I just didn't, again, I try to make sure that you guys spend the time to show up. I don't want to leave you in the dark. So if you can try to unraise your hand, I think you go down to Zoom where it says raise hand and there's a place that you can say, there you go, perfect, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to close agenda item number 2. I'm going to move on to, did I hear a, no, okay, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 3. Are there any staff reports?
2 things that I wanted to share with the commission. We are working on the ADU fire safety checklist that you requested. So we're starting with recommendations from the town's wildfire preparedness committee, that ad hoc committee. So we're working with those recommendations, bringing together some best practices. So the fire marshal and I will be collaborating on that, and we are working towards bringing that to you at the next meeting. So we're going to try to do that if possible. It was the council's request that go into effect as soon as possible so that it'd be lining up with the activation of the ordinance. So we're working on that and we'll bring that back to you. And then the other news is we have been doing a recruitment for a senior planner. We have made an offer and she has accepted. So we expect to have a new senior planner joining us on the 26th of this month. She'll have a lot of responsibility related to the housing element update process. And then gradually over time, taking over some oversight of some of our ASCC responsibilities, in addition to some other things. So this is a major thing for our staff. As you know, adding a staff person is significant. And so this gets the position back that we actually had approved before the pandemic and put on hold. So it's really exciting for us. So I'll be introducing you to her the next meeting that she's in after she started. So that's our staff report tonight.
Great, well, congratulations. And I'm sure she's looking forward to understanding the Portola Valley process and all the planning commissioners and ASCC commissioners. Okay, is there any public comment on the staff report? Carolyn has her hand up again, but I'm going to assume that this is still technical error. So I'm going to move on. And Caroline, if I'm wrong, I apologize, and I'll catch you next time. All right, so then moving on to approval of the minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes?
As you might expect, yes.
Thank you.
Only on the top of red page 90. About 5 lines down, the phrase, a way to think about balancing, I think I said various interests. The next sentence doesn't make sense. I don't think the general plan encourages the retention of nature. I think it maybe recognizes the value of nature. You can go back and look at what I actually said, but that just doesn't sound right. The next sentence, she indicated she was on the Portola Road Scenic Plan Committee, and the assumption made by the ASCC that the plan intended to preserve the view to the Western Hills was wrong. Well, I didn't say that. It wasn't primarily or only focused on the Western Hills. It was partially focused on the Western Hills. So maybe you could put in to preserve, like primarily or solely to preserve the views of the Western Hills. And then a very minor comment in the last line in that paragraph, agreed, the D should be removed, just a typo.
Is that it?
That's it.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners, do you have comments? No from Ann, no from John, Nicholas? No, okay. I have one small one on red page 89. The 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, about the middle of that paragraph. This is my comment. He said the general plan revision was on the horizon. He'd rather have the parcel be RE. I think that should be R1. And then during the general plan update, decide if the town wants to expand the commercial possibilities. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that I would have suggested that we change the zoning. I think I was saying that the zoning should remain R1. And then when we do the general plan, we could potentially update it. All right. So with that, I'm going to open up the minutes to public comment. So we're going to start with Caroline, which again, may be a technical issue. And if it is, she can drop back up. She's back off. All right. So then we have Betsy. Betsy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Taylor. Yes, beginning on red page 81 and straight through to the last page, red page 96. The date appearing in the footer does not correspond with the correct date. It's recorded each page as June 2nd, not June 16th. So I think you want to correct that.
Great, thank you. Anything else? I'm going to assume no. All right, so with that, could I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. A second? Okay, I think Nicholas seconded it on mute, but I will take his second. All right, so with that, could we have roll call on the vote on the minutes?
Commissioner Goulden,
Aye.
Commissioner Haskell,
Aye.
Commissioner Targ,
Aye.
Vice Chair Koff-Sill,
Aye.
Chair Taylor.
Aye. All right, so with that, congratulations. I think this was a productive meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I thought you might, okay?
Second.
And Ann, you're seconding?
Yeah.
All right, all in, well, I guess we're doing a roll call. Can we have a roll call on the adjournment motion?
We don't need a roll call on the adjournment motion.
Thank you. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Excellent. Thank you all very much. I'll look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
And
Bye,
to the attendees that are left, thank you for joining us.